Hey y'all, Mr. Houston here. Just wanted to touch base with you and wrap up mostly what we're learning first quarter here for social studies. Our last goal, let me pull it up here so we can read it. The last goal should be 533. And if I pull up my standards, as you can see, I have them all ready to go on my phone here. And you can download this app if you really want all the standards. That might be helpful for parents. It's also helpful for students to know exactly what we're going over here in class. But 534, I was off of one of them. It says locate the territory south of the River Ohio, identify its leaders, and explain how it was the first step to Tennessee's statehood. And then describe, this is 535, describe the steps that Tennessee took to become a state. Population requirements, votes by the citizens, creation of the state constitution, and getting congressional approval. And then identify the year that Tennessee became a state, its first governor, and the original capital. So just wanted to touch base with you. We had been talking about in class how the Chickamaugas had been a group of Native Americans and other people that had defected from the British, Spanish, and different settlers in the area, and they came together down near Chattanooga in southeastern Tennessee. Part of that reason they went down there was the location of the rivers that went through there. They're pretty treacherous. If you've ever driven through Chattanooga, you've probably seen big, tall mountains, almost really steep mountains with valleys that drop down into those rivers, made it really difficult for boats and people to pass through there. So the Chickamaugas being down there ultimately made it hard for people to settle in middle Tennessee, to move from the east to the middle and then making their way down to the west. And what ends up happening is after some time passes, as you know, we have the lost state of Franklin. Franklin doesn't become a state, but they still have this problem with Native Americans. As the settlers are trying to move west, the Native Americans are there, and especially the Chickamaugas who had left the Cherokee. They're continually attacking the settlers. And don't get me wrong, it's not one-sided. It's not just the Native Americans attacking the settlers. The settlers are also attacking Native Americans in their villages. And so it is a very tense time to be a settler in Tennessee. And so Joseph Brown is an interesting character. This is tricky, and this is how politics work a lot of times. The area can't become a state until they can settle safely and send populations to the west, as the Native Americans are preventing that through violence and all the other issues that come along with trying to settle in a new area. Joseph Brown comes into the picture, and he's somebody that he was on a flatboat, as far as I understand the story, with his family. They're attacked down in that area in East Tennessee by the Chickamaugas. His parents are killed right in front of him. And then he eventually becomes adopted by them because he doesn't have any parents. I think he was a pretty young kid at the time. So he lives with them for a couple of years until they're during a prisoner exchange, I guess you could say. He's released. And he makes his way into this Southwest Territory. Now, William Blount, I believe, is the governor of the Southwest Territory. This is the area that's been newly acquired. It's not part of Tennessee, but it contains where present-day Tennessee is. And so they have to be really careful on how they do this. If the governor of the Southwest Territory, if he sends a military or an offensive down to take on the Native Americans who are supported by the Spanish who are down in Florida and controlling the southeastern part of parts of the United States, that could really get them upset. And so the Spanish could then retaliate. That could break out into an all-out war between the Spanish and the United States, which we just finished a war with the British, and that becomes a big problem. So what ends up happening is a volunteer army comes together, hence the Tennessee Volunteers. You'll hear that quite often, people stepping up to challenges and finding ways to get to a solution. And at this time, that involved getting involved in the military. in military operations or military-like operations. And so Joseph Brown actually leads or is somebody who's very important in regards to this Nickajack expedition. And they're going to go down, and a bunch of these volunteers are going to go down and take on the Chickamaugas, but they have an inside scoop. The Chickamaugas are well hidden. It's very difficult to travel. Some of their villages are hard to get to. There's secret paths, like secret Cherokee paths through the mountains to get to where they're located. And Joseph Brown, uh, since he lived there for a couple of years, he actually walks them through exactly what they need to do to take on the Chickamaugas. And so when he does that, the Chickamaugas, it's a surprise attack. They actually, I think they only find a handful of Chickamaugas at the first settlement. What's interesting about this too is this Nickajack is an area right on the like right off of the highway of 24, from what I've read. You drive right over the lake, and submerged under that lake over time is the remnants of these villages in this battle. And so Joseph Brown, along with some others, they eventually take on the Chickamaugas, and they rout them pretty well. The Chickamaugas are defeated pretty easily, pretty handily at Nickajack Cave, and then from there, the Nickajack, any of the other soldiers or whatever you want to call it, warriors for the Chickamaugas, they flee to Running Water, which is an area, I believe it was north on that river. Don't quote me on that. And of course, the volunteers, Tennessee volunteers, not Tennessee yet, but the volunteers from the Southwest Territory take them on. And in that first battle, I think only a couple of them are shot. None of them are killed, but they kill like 70 of the Chickamaugas. I think that's the number. And it's a pretty fierce battle, but this ultimately ends up being the last main battle between the Cherokee and the settlers. And what ends up happening, the Chickamaugas are pretty well defeated. They're forced to sign a pretty firm treaty that doesn't really change over time. And this ultimately allows for Tennessee the settlers in present-day Tennessee to form and become a state. Now, in order to become a state, they got to have at least 60,000 people living in that area. That's part of the requirements. It has to be ratified by the current states of the United States through Congress. And ultimately, they get all that stuff taken care of by June 1st of 1796. Tennessee becomes the first state. Tennessee becomes the 16th state in our union. And from there on, you guys know the rest of the story. People move west. There's still going to be some tensions with Native Americans as people are moving west, but really shutting down that area that the Chickamaugas had held for a long time down in Chattanooga. That really allowed people to travel via the rivers and through that area without being attacked, and to travel safely so they could move into Tennessee, start their families. Those families grow. They go on to have more families. They bring friends. They bring relatives. And Tennessee grows and grows and grows steadily to the state that we know and love today. So really interesting story. There's some good information on Tennessee history for kids. I definitely recommend that you check out. I'm also going to post a link if you want to take a look with some more detailed information about that one specific battle, the Nickajack Expedition or the Nickajack Offensive. So anyway, that's all I got for you today. I appreciate you guys being here, tuning in, and look forward to speaking to you next time. Great day.